wondering, because we're doing some research and we saw that you did quite a lot of work in Oxford. We were wondering what your Oxford experience was like. Obviously, Ollie and I, we've lived there for the last 2 years.
A wonderful time at Oxford as a staff member. It was my first job after university, and I was the first full-time professional outreach person based in a college. I worked at University College, and I'd come from York and I'd been the student union president and things like that, and so I came to Oxford and was really ambitious about what we could do in the college. And I had 5 years of basically doing loads of weird and wonderful stuff. Like, we set up the first ambassador scheme. We created an alternative prospectus, which we crowdsourced, and we printed on the Guardian's print press in between printing runs. So it was really cheap and we never had to worry about giving them out. We ran a road show to all the schools in South Yorkshire, where we literally got a man called Naz who took us round in his van, and we visited every school. It was wonderful. And I think one of the reasons it was so wonderful was I had a great head of house. I had Sir Ivor Crew, who, had come from Essex University, was heading up the Conference of Colleges Admissions Committee, and he really gave me permission to spread my wings. So it was great. But my favourite ever email from that job was an email from the domestic bursar, Elizabeth Crawford, who is a wonderful domestic bursar, and it said in capital letters, "The children will not be served lobster," because we had to do a lot of work to get the buttery serving food that primary school kids and younger children would be able to eat. But yeah, it was a wonderful experience. Not all of it was comfortable, though. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes I felt like I was wearing a hair shirt to try and ensure other people didn't have to wear that hair shirt. So I can remember a really pointed discussion about in the prospectus as to whether we referred to breakfast, lunch and dinner. And I was like, can we just say 3 meals a day? Because that doesn't rule anyone out. Because where I'm from, it's breakfast, dinner and tea. So yeah, it was great. And I had a lovely time in the broader city as well. I really got to know Oxford in its fullness. I was a local councillor for a while, particularly for a ward where loads of students lived. So right in the city centre. So very special place in my heart has Oxford.
Yeah, you said you were one of the first access officers, right? Or the first. So did you experience a lot of friction in that way from people who didn't really understand sort of quite the role yet and what the kind of thing that you were trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, you can set up all the programs and activities you want, but actually the bigger cultural change has to come as well alongside that. And I can definitely remember a few really uncomfortable moments. One moment does stand out where I had a visit of some students from, I think they were from Wembley Way in London, and a student at the college who, let's say, wasn't a student ambassador, said, it's diversity and inclusion gone mad. All of the kids were non-white, and I just thought, oh no, what am I going to do? And the moment I knew things were really changing is when another student said, it's not on, mate. You can't speak like that in front of school children. They're entitled to visit this place and be a part of what we're doing. And that's when I knew things were really starting to switch around. So we made some very meaningful changes at Univ. And I think we created a model that other colleges could take and run with, which was about doing very sort of thoughtful outreach work that built relationships with schools rather than what I call drive-by outreach. So just sort of rocking up and doing a parents' evening and off you go. We were really looking to build more long-term relationships, work with younger pupils, bring through a talent pipeline. So yeah, it wasn't without its difficult moments, but I left after 5 years knowing that the cultural change was sort of starting to really swing in the right direction. But ultimately I left because I wanted to work somewhere where we could have a conversation about admissions processes and contextual admissions in particular, which I felt at Oxford we weren't there yet. And so that's why I went off to King's College London, which is a huge institution, as you might know.
It's really interesting. Do you think that because of Oxford's prestigious history and the absolute intellectual prestige that it holds, and the amount of people that want to go to Oxford, that it's kind of a hotbed for these discussions and controversies around social mobility? So, for example, getting to Oxford is, some might say, the goal, Oxbridge, that is.
Yeah, I mean, it has a very special place in the hearts and minds of the British public, right? The UK's original university. And so inevitably it faces scrutiny. But you can trace a direct line back to things like the Laura Spence case and Gordon Brown's intervention there, which really put Oxford on the map as a place where, fairness was really being questioned, and there was a lot of scrutiny from the media. I do think it's right that the university sector has to continually let the general public and folks who are applying to university know that they're going to be treated fairly and that everyone's got a shot if they've got the grades to play, right? And that, for me, I think is the really important thing. That said, I think that the focus on Oxford and Cambridge is sometimes really unhelpful and distracts from other parts of the sector where we need to have a conversation about either access or, increasingly so, what happens to those students once they're at university. Because one thing you can say about Oxford, it's got very low dropout rates. That's not the case at other institutions across the UK.